When night finally arrives, your body feels exhausted, but your mind refuses to rest. You replay every moment, every glance, every pause, every word you said too quickly or not quickly enough. And that's when the truth settles in. Surviving here isn't about making it through the day, physically. It's about learning a completely different language of survival you were never taught. Around you, people move with quiet certainty built from years of adaptation, while you are still trying to understand the rules. And you begin to wonder if making it to tomorrow is even possible. Before we uncover what history tried to hide, subscribe to Unseen Evidence, because some truths were never meant to be found. And tell me where you're watching this from. I'm curious to know. Let's continue. History does not begin with loud moments or dramatic declarations, but with quiet awakenings that arrive before the sun has fully decided to rise. And if you suddenly found yourself alive in the year 1776, inside a world that does not recognize your independence or your voice, the first feeling would not be fear but disorientation, because nothing around you would move according to the logic you understand, and even the air itself would feel heavier with expectation, as if time belonged to someone else rather than you. And before your thoughts fully formed, you would realize that your day had already begun long before you opened your eyes, that movement was required before comfort could exist, and that survival depended on understanding rules no one would explain directly, because this world relied on observation more than instruction, and silence more than conversation. And you would notice immediately that people around you moved with a precision shaped by years of experience, a quiet choreography learned through repetition and necessity, while you struggled to understand where to stand or how quickly to respond. And the hardest realization would be that nothing here exists for your convenience, not the schedule, not the environment, not even the emotional space to process confusion. And as the early morning unfolded, you would begin to see how power is expressed through routine rather than dramatic gestures, through expectations that remain unspoken, yet firmly enforced. And you would learn quickly that asking too many questions could mark you as unfamiliar with the rhythm everyone else has learned to follow. So instead, you would watch, listening for subtle cues in tone and posture, noticing how people adjust their behavior depending on who enters the space, how conversations shift mid-sentence, how eyes lower or glance away at precise moments. And slowly it would become clear that survival is a language spoken through restraint rather than expression, and your modern instincts to assert yourself or clarify misunderstandings might create more problems than they solve, because the system you now exist inside values predictability over individuality. And as the sun rises higher, the physical labor begins to feel real in your muscles, not necessarily overwhelming but constant, unbroken by the familiar pauses you expect. And you would understand that exhaustion is not just physical, but mental, because every action requires awareness of invisible boundaries, every movement shaped by expectations you are still trying to decipher. And while you might assume that fairness guides outcomes, you would learn instead that unpredictability governs daily life, making emotional awareness more important than physical strength, because understanding mood, hierarchy, and timing becomes the difference between moving smoothly through the day or drawing unwanted attention. And by mid-morning, you would start to notice how people conserve energy not only by minimizing movement, but by limiting emotional expression, speaking only when necessary, reacting carefully, maintaining a balance between visibility and invisibility that feels almost impossible to master. Without years of practice, and hunger would arrive not as a personal signal, but as part of a shared rhythm where food is distributed according to systems you do not control, making even small moments of eating feel structured rather than comforting. And you would notice how conversations change during these moments, some voices growing quieter, others exchanging brief humor that feels both genuine and cautious. And as the hours stretch forward, the weight of constant awareness would begin to settle into your thoughts, creating a subtle tension that never fully disappears, because survival here requires continuous adjustment, and you would realize that your modern expectations of independence would not translate easily, that directness might be misread, that hesitation might be misunderstood, and gradually you would start to understand that resilience in this environment is not loud or dramatic, but quiet and strategic. expressed through observation and patience rather than confrontation. And as afternoon arrives, the psychological strain deepens because exhaustion lowers your ability to monitor yourself while the need for awareness remains constant. And you might find yourself replaying interactions seconds after they happen, wondering whether your tone was correct, whether your pace matched others, whether you unintentionally crossed boundaries you cannot see. And despite this pressure, you would also notice moments of humanity emerging in unexpected ways. Subtle exchanges between people who understand each other without speaking openly, shared glances that carry reassurance, small acts of kindness hidden beneath routine. And these moments would feel powerful, precisely because they exist quietly, offering glimpses of identity preserved within a system designed to control identity. And as the day continues, you would begin to understand that community exists but under tension, shaped by survival rather than comfort, with trust built slowly through observation rather than declaration, and stories passed carefully as warnings or guidance, helping others navigate risks without drawing attention. And by evening, your body would expect rest, but your awareness would remain alert because fatigue does not eliminate responsibility, and you would watch as some people reclaim fragments of themselves through music, storytelling, or memory, transforming brief moments into spaces where individuality survives. And you might feel both inspired and overwhelmed by the realization that resilience here is sustained through connection rather than isolation. And when darkness finally settles, you would lie down with a mind that refuses to quiet completely, replaying every detail of the day, every glance, every choice, analyzing what you might do differently tomorrow. And the deepest realization would arrive slowly, that surviving even one day requires unlearning habits you have carried your entire life, replacing them with awareness, shaped by necessity rather than preference. And you would understand that the people who endured this world were not simply stronger, but more adapted to an environment that demanded constant vigilance, and that your struggle would not be a failure of character, but a reflection of how unfamiliar the rules truly are. And as sleep approaches, you would feel time stretching behind you, a single day carrying the weight of many, and history would begin to feel less like distant events, and more like lived experience, built from countless quiet decisions made moment by moment. And if morning came again, you would wake differently, more aware of subtle signals, more cautious in movement, more attuned to emotional currents beneath the surface, realizing that survival is not one dramatic act, but a series of small adjustments repeated endlessly. And you would understand that history is not defined only by famous dates or powerful figures, but by the endurance of individuals navigating systems that shaped every hour of their lives. And that the true reason you might not survive 24 hours is not because survival is impossible, but because adaptation requires time. And time is the one thing you would not have when arriving suddenly in a world already moving without you.